This is going to be a very short video, and it was a request from one of my local viewers who was over here visiting this week, actually come to pick up one of the sheet metal tools. And we had a conversation, and in the conversation this gentleman wanted to ask a question. How did your YouTube channel become what it is? How did you get your name? And a little bit of, the backstory, so to speak. I think I've told this in bits and pieces, but for just to make a simple, clear introduction, I'm not going to say a reintroduction video, but let's cut to the chase. Obviously, if you watch this channel, you know I'm Jim Deadman. And you know my story. I've told it 100 times, but we're going to start this thing from the front and go to the back. Sawlogs plastic hubs. Basically, it's a combination of several things in my life that I've done personally. In my lifetime, I was raised in a rural area. My late dad was a mill worker and a farmer, and his last full-time job was a dairy farmer. And when I was a small child, he was stricken with emphysema and had to quit work. And so we relocated, built through the generosity of family, friends, and good fortune. We had a nice home in Kings Mountain, North Carolina. Well, my dad, if I will say this from a retirement standpoint, you can't go from a hero to zero. If you've went your whole entire life, and especially if you was 35 years old, you can't go from working your tail off to nothing, even though you do have health problems. So you learn to develop hobbies. And one of my dad's hobbies was fishing, which I abhor, but he loved it. And he got into making lures. We knew a lot of people that fished. In fact, there was an article in the Charlotte Observer about some of his fishing prowess, as far as, because the guy that also wrote about NASCAR wrote about fishing. And he was outdoors editor too. Dad done a lot of fishing for what we call white bass here. Smallmouth bass, some parts of the country. It crossed the border in South Carolina at Lake Wateree. And what he would do is he made these little spoons up they called ice flies. And what they done is they looked like a minnow. And there was a little blade, and they had a like feathers tied to it, something like a jig or something of that nature, or a bucktail. You folks that fish know what I'm talking about. Well, to attract the fish, you had to have some sort of a floating plug that you put in the front of it. So Dad come up with the idea of taking a piece of wood, and he whittled the very first 2 or 3 out and painted them and balanced them and put eyes into it to simulate a fish that struck a minnow. So because we were raised in North Carolina, and if you watch any of the sawing channels, a good one that comes to my mind is Out of the Woods Forestry. I love to watch Nathan up there, even though I'm not into sawing wood. But a tree here in the South, like a pine tree or whatever, is cut up to be firewood, was called a saw log. That's what a saw log is. It's a tree trunk to be taken to the sawmill to be made into lumber. That's what it's called. Dad named the plugs that. And what happened was we got to the point we were selling them, and so to expedite the process, Dad made wood lathes. Had bought a wood lathe, and I got instructed to turn the wooden plugs out with the wood lathe. Well, later on down the road, we got into the CB radios, so we needed handles, and that's kind of where all that come from. So that's where the saw log part come from, and I just used it with my CB handle. And so fast forward about 15 years, and I got into go-kart racing and started my home machine shop. Basically, from the time I was 18 years old till I retired 3 years ago, I've been a machinist of some sort. So what happened was I bought a little mini lathe to play with, and I got into go-kart racing. Well, when I bought all my go-kart stuff up, I ended up having a bunch of wheels and tires and needing buggies made and this, that, and the other. And as in my channel you watch today, I'm good at creating stuff out of nothing. That's just me. So what I did is I figured out how to take a piece of Darling, because I had a bunch of it that come from my employer, pieces and bits, and made little hubs that would fit go-kart tires. And I made my buggies and stuff. Anybody that's familiar with go-kart racing also familiar with chemically altering tires. So the next thing is they made these metal stands for people to put 4 tires on. It was made, and what they was doing, they would go to the go-kart shop and buy front hubs, or bearing hubs. And so they would have something like $60 or $70 just in steel aluminum hubs. So I started marketing the plastic hubs to sell, just like my dad did with the fishing, to help support my racing. And I actually have done real well at it. And so obviously the Sawlogs plastic hubs. You see a picture on my wall, and I'll show it to you. Let me just pull this camera off. Excuse me just a minute while we're talking, and I'll just show you the picture on my shop wall here. Flip the camera around while we're talking. This is when I was go-kart racing. And if you notice, I don't know if I can zoom in close enough, but on the side of the go-kart it says Sawlogs plastic hubs. I was living in Salisbury at that time. And that was one of my wins when I was kart racing, by the way. So that's how I done that. Well, excuse me for kicking the camera, please. Oh, I got all these good stuff up here, but it's going. We'll just leave it going here. Let me kick this off. Okay. Now, so that's the kind of the backstory. It's a combination of my youth, making wooden plugs for my father, and plastic hubs for go-kart racing, which I was successful. Obviously, my machine shop has expanded from them days, from the little mini lathe. It was a homier. It wasn't a Harbor Freight, homier. And it went from that to what you see in this shop today. So, and the logo is actually a CAD drawing a friend of mine did of the hub that I supplied it to him. So that's what the drawing you see at the first of the video. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this little history lesson. Sorry it wasn't much of a video. For the guy that asked about it, okay, you've got a video. And I hope it's informative. I don't expect this to break any records on viewing, but I'll remind you, please like, subscribe. If you like my machining videos or my slot, please do. All my videos ain't me standing here for 8 minutes running my yip. So, for all that said, I appreciate you coming by. Appreciate you sticking to the story. And we will see you in that very next video. And have a wonderful day.